City Council workshop for the month of April 2023. We'll begin with our pledge. I'll ask Councilwoman Cheney to lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Let the records reflect that all members of council are present and accounted for this evening. We'll begin with our review of the minutes of the March 8th and March 13th regular meetings. Are there any additions, corrections, questions about the minutes as presented to the council? All right, hearing none, those will be up for your approval on Monday evening. Next, I'm going to open the public hearing for the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget and constant yield tax rate. Records reflect that the public hearing will open at 7:32. I'm going to go over some brief guidelines before we begin. If you choose to give comments, you will approach the lectern up here. Do not get too close to the microphone, but please state your name and your address. You will be given 3 minutes to speak. As you near the end of 3 minutes, I will remind you that your time is running out and ask that you complete your sentence. This is not a question and answer period. This is a time to offer your comments to the mayor and council as a whole, not directed to one specific member. If you become vulgar or disruptive, you may be asked to leave the meeting, so please keep it civil if you would. With that, the public hearing is now open. I'll invite anyone who wishes to speak to step up to the lectern and begin. And form an orderly line when you do so, please.
Don't push.
All right, with no takers, I'm going to leave the public hearing open for the time being. We'll revisit shortly. We'll move on to, I'll ask every member of council if they have any conflicts of interest on the agenda items this evening.
No, sir.
No.
All right, everyone is unconflicted. We will move on. We're going to run 2 public comment sessions here simultaneously. I'm going to give everyone the opportunity to comment on non-agenda items. If you'd like to speak on anything that is not on this piece of paper, now is your opportunity to do so. Same rules apply. All right, with no takers, we shall move on. Up for adoption Monday evening, we will have ordinance 01-2023. This is the fiscal year 2023-2024 operating budget. And I'll ask members of council, do you have any questions, comments, fits of rage? All right, Mr. Weeprick, do you have anything to add for us?
I would like to just give a quick update. Since we introduced the budget, we have been tracking our capital spending for for projects that are going to overlap fiscal years. So as we had talked about previously, we have, now that we've had March actuals reconciled, we've reduced for the FY24 budget, we have spent some money in stormwater already, so we've lowered the capital for stormwater in the general fund by $40,000 to reflect what we spent this year that we won't need to carry over. In the utility fund, we have added Carol Vista pumping station controls, and we'll talk a little bit more about that farther down in the agenda. That is a $35,000 expense. And we have also, per the capital improvement program, added West Baltimore Street sewer replacement. And that's one that's going to use ARPA funds. That is a $360,000 project. And we have also, per the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, added the Memorial Park sewer replacement, and that is a $440,000 capital expense, and that will be coming from utility fund balance. So those items have been updated since we introduced the budget. Just, again, tracking what we've spent this year that we won't need to carry over. And that's really as close as we're going to get, assuming passage this month.
On Monday evening.
Right.
Okay. Any questions on those changes to the proposed budget? All right. That will be up for adoption on Monday evening. Next, we have ordinance 02-2023. This is the fiscal year 23-24 water sewer rate. A reminder that rate is intended to stay the same. Questions, discussion, lively debate, animated tantrics, nothing. All right. Anything from staff on that? Still the
Yes, sir.
same plan? All happy?
Yes.
That also will be up for your adoption Monday evening. Our final ordinance in the trio is ordinance 03-2023. This is the FY 23-24 tax rate. And second verse, same as the first, it will remain the same. Has the notice been put out regarding the tax rate? The public notice?
I believe so, but I will clarify and have that for Monday night.
All right, very good. The tax rate, while it is remaining the same, is subject to the constant yield provisions from the state of Maryland, which by keeping it the same, we are actually looking to bring in more tax revenue, although keeping the rate the same due to assessments and growth. So the notice that is coming out states that there is to be an increase in tax revenue, but the rate is remaining the same. Questions from council? All right, that'll be up for your adoption on Monday evening. I will say, if everything goes well in the House of Delegates in the state, this may be the last year that we're subject to the constant yield notices that I find particularly misleading. Fingers crossed. Our last resolution up for adoption Monday evening will be Resolution 2023-05, the water allocation for the month of April. Questions? Mathematician input? It does check. I used a calculator. Discussion. All right. Hearing none, that resolution will also be up for adoption on Monday evening. I'll make one final call for the public hearing of the budget and constant yield tax rate for FY 23-24. Same rules apply as mentioned before. If you'd like to speak regarding the budget, your opportunity is here at the lectern. All right. With no additional takers, I will close the public hearing at 7:38 p.m. and we'll move on with business. Mr. Weeprick, do you have a city manager report for us this evening?
I sure do. Let's see, capital equipment, there is some updates that are in your packet, and really, we've just coordinated things to coincide with our budget this year. So there are a couple items that we slid back another year, and we had some tweaking to do. And I don't know if you want me to go line by line through if anybody really remembers what was in the previous version or not. But basically, under street, we had listed a pickup truck and a small dump truck. That's just going to be the small dump truck, but the price for that, we have a better estimate now, so that's going to $140,000. Under water capital, we've gotten rid of the emergency generator and light tower. We don't think that's going to be as expensive as initially envisioned, so that may not end up being a capital equipment
So look,
item.
you still procure, but not as a
So
capital.
the intent is still to procure it, but we think it's going to fall under the threshold. And under sewer capital, we have actually added replacing truck number 8, and we're still planning on getting the pettibone, or the telehandler is also called. So that represents $165,000 between those two for sewer capital equipment next year. And we've also revised the cost for the 2 police vehicles up to $120,000. And that'll be replacing car 21 and car 22. So those are just some updates in the capital equipment program. Second item we've been talking about under my report is the community village ordinance and updates. As I'd mentioned previously, we reached out to one of the developers with a pending project that intended to utilize Community Village and kind of laid out the draft parameters of getting rid of the alleys for the single-family homes and keeping them for the townhomes, and also talking about a potential open space requirement increase in order to lose the alleys. They have worked with a land planner to kind of come up with some ideas of what that could look like fitting in those parameters. And we'll have some more on that next month, but at this point, it's looking optimistic that we can still have a viable project while requiring the alleys with the townhomes. So that's moving a little bit slowly, but we really want to try to come up with something that's buildable, is going to provide some density and still maintain something of that community village aesthetic that was intended from the beginning. So we're still working on that, and I think that the result is going to be positive there. So, and of course, with that, we can expect that there is going to need to be a certain density to be able to pay for the infrastructure that we're going to require.
Right.
So we're in conversations with how we might achieve that, as far as what parts of the code might need to be amended, and if there might be things that we would address that may be project-specific, utilizing a DARA. And I know that in the past, I've been somewhat critical of how we use the DARA with the Meads Crossing project to kind of whittle away the community village aesthetic. But in the beginning of that project, we did use the DARA to set some general parameters for the project. And something like that could be used going forward also. So maybe a combination of code revisions and use of the DARA to come up with a good product for the city. Roberts Mill Road and Broad Street, I'm going to stop reporting on that unless folks have questions, because that's also in the Public Works report. So I felt like now that it's really under construction, Kevin's reporting on that each month. So I'm just going to leave that under his report. If anybody has questions about that, of course, I can field those or get answers, but
I think at the very least, each month, I would like a brief update of progress, percentage of completion, timeline, things like that. I think it's good for us to know and also for the public to hear it as well.
Okay.
Do you have an estimate of percentage-wise where they are on the project?
I would say single digits still.
Perfect.
So here's a big surprise. Doing the sewer line, working, excuse me, working from
Have some water, Jim.
the intersection of Broad Street and East Baltimore, working up the hill. We hit rock. Surprise.
You're right.
So that slowed things down a bit.
I think anyone that's built a house in this city in the last 150 years could have told you were going to hit rock.
True.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I think going forward, if we can just have a brief update on that information, that would be helpful for everybody.
okay, I can pull the highlights out of Kevin's report and include them in
Perfect.
my verbal report.
Questions for the city manager on his report or the departmental reports this evening? All right. Hearing nothing further, we'll go to Mr. Gullo. Do you have a legal report for us, Mr. Gullo?
Yes, at long last, I can report to you that the Syrian property purchased for the bypass is complete. All the deeds have been signed, the money's changed hands. The deed is now to the county, and the county will take care of recording it. And as you know, this means the 4-acre parcel that we purchased is now part of the county parcel. So your next step should be trying to lobby the county to give them all that parcel to you.
Right.
And the sooner the better on that. So that is good news and completes that part of your bypass acquisition. So unless you have any questions on that, I'm going to turn it over. Clara is there, and I don't know if she has anything she wants to say about the upcoming election. We've been busy setting things up and deadlines and things like that. So Clara, if there's anything, let them have it.
Okay. On March 27th, the Taneytown Board of Election Supervisors certified candidates for the May 1st, 2023 election. The candidates for the office of mayor are Bradley Wance, Christopher Miller, and Daniel Haynes. For the office of council member, the candidates are James McCarron and Christopher Tillman. Just a few words about absentee ballots. Beginning April 10th, absentee ballots will start to be mailed to residents who have completed the request forms. Just a reminder that when you're mailing, residents are mailing back those forms, just please allow enough time for them to go through the mailing system and reach city office by election day. Also, on beginning April 10th, residents can come here to City Hall and receive their ballot and vote the ballot that day and turn it in if they'd like to do that. May 1st is our city election, and polls will open at 7 a.m. and close at 7 p.m., and that will be at the Taneytown Police Station at 120 East Baltimore Street.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Gullo, do you have anything additional for us?
No, that's all I have, unless there's other questions related to these matters. It's going to be a very busy month.
All right, council, do you have questions for Madam Clerk or Mr. Gullo on either of those reports? All right, thank you very much for your attendance this evening. All right, moving into our new business. Our first item is our monthly financial report. Any questions from council on the monthly financial report as presented this evening? All right, hearing none, we'll move into the accounts payables, and I will ask the same question of you. All right. With nothing, we'll move on to item 3, nomination of police chief. I did send to the council a letter describing the process as it went forward. I'll share some of that information here as well. There we go. So the position for chief of police was advertised for over 30 days. A total of 15 resumes were received. They were reviewed initially by City Manager Weeprick, Councilwoman Foster, and myself, where it was narrowed down to 6 candidates for interviews. Those 6 candidates were Robert Altoff, Robert Mitchell, William Farr, Christopher McDonald, Jeffrey Partridge, and Christian Price. We conducted interviews over 2 days. The interview panel consisted of City Manager Weeprick, Councilwoman Foster, La Plata Police Chief Carl Schinner, Denton Police Chief George Bacorn, myself. Clerk Kalman was also present as our HR representative and lending her perspective throughout the process. At the end of that process, through all 6 interviews, we reconvened about 5 days after the last interview and had final discussion over all the notes that we took. And from that, I left the meeting with my decision. And with that, I nominate Jeffrey Partridge to be the chief of police for the city of Taneytown. He anticipates coming to us with over 20 years of experience with Maryland State Police, where he did spend the entirety of his career, ending as First Sergeant Regional Supervisor of the Aviation Command for Maryland State Police. His resume is extremely impressive. His supervisory skills, I think, were top-notch. I was very pleased with him. I believe that decision was agreed upon by the members of the panel, that he's the best candidate for this position. So I'll entertain any questions from the city council on that if you wish, but without any questions on Monday evening, I will ask for your approval to hire Mr. Jeffrey Partridge to that position.
Mr. Mayor, in your email, you talked a little bit about Mr. Partridge's philosophy on community-based policing. Could you touch on that a little bit?
I can. One of the things that I was very impressed with that really made him stand out among other candidates were some of his thoughts on community policing, which he is very adamant about and I believe has had some experience with as well. Being extremely visible to the public, working very closely with the administrative staff, attending not just city events, but he talked about youth sports activities. A popular thing with chiefs is being at the schools on the first day. And also offering, he mentioned initiatives like first aid training and Narcan training for the community, which which I think is an important thing to be able to do. I expect he's going to be a very visible police chief in the city. I think you'll see him frequently. Very possibly, when he's able to get out of the office, we may even see him on patrol. It seems to be where he seems to want to be out in the community in that way. I think our police department has an amazing relationship with our community, and I give them all the credit in the world for that. I'm looking forward to a chief that can help take that one step further and be a part of it himself as well. Any other questions or anything?
No, that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, with nothing additional, I'll bring that name again Monday evening and ask for your approval. All right, next under new business, we have a capital improvement program updates. Do you have anything additional to what you've already shared with us?
So, right, the earlier mention was capital equipment.
Oh, excuse me.
So these are the capital improvement programs, so this is the more bricks and mortar sort of
Yes.
things. So just in keeping with some of the, I've talked about this a little bit as we've been focused on the budget. Each year, I would like to update the capital improvement program either along with or close to when we adopt the budget. So each year, we'll drop the previous year's projects off, add one more year on as we're able to, so that way we kind of keep a rolling 6-year window of projects to project for. And also that way we don't have the large task of starting from scratch once every 6 years. So as we've been updating the capital portion of the budget, we've also been updating the capital improvement program project list. What's in your packet this month is just the addendum that's essentially an Excel worksheet that lists the projects and what year we intend to complete them and how much we're going to spend for each of them. So that's been updated to, again, align with the budget, with the capital portion of the budget. There are a couple items that have slid into the future year because we probably don't have the capacity in-house to manage too many projects at one time. So there were a couple that we pushed back a year just because we know that with Roberts Mill Road and Broad Street and some of the other projects, that's going to take a lot of our focus. So we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. Let's see. In the addendum that's in your packet, you'll probably notice that, that the FY29 is kind of thin. We haven't added a whole lot there because we really want to complete some things in the next year and a half and see where we are in terms of fund balance. We are anticipating kind of a dry spell for those funds to be replenished because there are no major development plans in the pipeline right now. And the impact fees for water and sewer are where we get a lot of our money for these capital projects. So right now, in the existing capital improvement program, we have more projects. You know, we will spend through our ARPA money in the next year and a half, and we're still left with millions of dollars of projects that we will pay for out of utility fund balance primarily. We don't want to throw a whole bunch in right now until we have a better feel for when we're going to be replenishing that fund balance, that utility fund balance through the impact fees. And we also want to see the impact of some of the projects that we are planning on completing in the next 2 years to help guide us as far as where the priorities are going to be a little bit farther. Right now, the priorities have been largely tightening up the water system and achieving compliance at the wastewater treatment plant. So most of our projects have been focused on water, sewer, and then related street repairs. Of course, for me, the priority is gaining compliance at the treatment plant. That's why the sewer is the lion's share of the projects we're doing right now. But if we see that that does tighten up the system, reducing our inflow and infiltration and allowing us to recover that capacity to designate for future growth, that may drive the projects that we're going to project, you know, when we get to FY29 or 30. So right now, that 6-year out range is a little thin as far as the projects go, but we will add to it as we complete some of the ones that are ongoing right now. So just, just when you look at the chart, it's notably, kind of empty on FY '29 right now. So I just wanted to speak to that we didn't forget to put something out there. We just really want to see the effect of some of the projects we have going on right now to help guide us for that 6th year. That said, if anybody has questions about it, I'm happy to do my best on those. But next month, what I'd like is if anybody has any, specific questions or concerns, let me know, either email me or we can talk about it, for Monday night. But what I'd like to do is have the rest of this month to update the justification sheets. When we adopted the capital improvement program, you'll recall that we had basically some text in the beginning and then a little narrative of each project, and then this Excel sheet that listed out the years and the costs and everything. So this is kind of the bones of it. And over the course of the next month, before next month's meeting and workshop, we'll have the entire booklet updated for adoption again with a resolution, just like we did in, well, I guess it was FY '22, towards the tail end of FY '22 that we adopted it. So again, this is kind of the framework for it, and we'll flesh everything out and have it before you in its entirety next month.
Have we taken a recent look at the sidewalk inventory?
As far as gaps in the sidewalk network?
Correct.
Sidewalk network?
Yes.
We haven't focused on those too much. I mean, we are planning in the Parks and Rec capital improvement program. We do have, sidewalk down at Memorial Park that will link the existing sidewalk on both sides of the football field. So that's one sidewalk infill. But with most of the sidewalks being on private property, they haven't really been looked at as far as the capital improvement program.
As a part of some of these street projects, like George Street and Middle Street, are there any sidewalk improvements associated with those projects?
When we get to those, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I know they're a couple years in the future. I just want to make sure that we are still looking at having a walkable community. And
Absolutely.
That's a goal
Yes.
that we need to have.
Yes, and much like the Roberts Mill Road Broad Street project, we are working to add sidewalks where there are gaps. In that particular project, we are planning to add sidewalk to one side of Roberts Mill Road. Ideally, it would be on both sides, but the cost and logistics to do that on Roberts Mill Road was just daunting.
Right.
And it would have really driven project costs up significantly. So we're happy to get sidewalk at least on one side where we had no sidewalk. On Broad Street, it's also going to be replacing the sidewalks that are in overall rather poor condition on Broad Street, and also filling in a gap on the one side where the sidewalks are. So that certainly is a part of those projects as we move forward. And George and Middle Street should be the same way.
Okay. Have we looked at anything on Trevanion Road for sidewalks to help connect some of those?
We haven't revisited that lately. There are some environmental challenges with those. On one side of Trevanion, we have some steep slopes. There are one or two lots that would be pretty straightforward to connect some, scattered sections. But on one side of the road, we have slopes and driveways that, if you were to build a retaining wall to cut the slope back and install a sidewalk, now you also have driveways that are already very steep, and to get the ADA compliant portion and have a level 4-foot wide or even 3-foot wide apron area that would meet ADA slope requirements, now you're making the remainder of the driveway that much more steeper.
Right.
So it would be essentially taking an already steep slope and then shortening it by 3 lateral feet, making it even steeper than it is now. So on that side of the road, there's a lot of challenge. And on the other side of the road, there is a drainage course, a drainage ditch that's very close to the edge of the road. And that's going to push the sidewalk one way. Either we're going to have to redo the drainage swale and push it away from the road, or push the sidewalk farther off the road than usual.
Right.
And we currently have very little in the way of easements
That was my
along
next
Trevanion
question,
Road.
is if we had
So
any.
we had a minor subdivision not too many years ago, and with that, the lot that got subdivided off of the larger piece, we did get a sidewalk easement across that property. We didn't on the larger piece because that is expected to be going through a subdivision process. And as part of that process, it would install sidewalk along Trevanion Road.
Okay,
So the area has some construction challenges.
okay. When was the sidewalk inventory last updated?
It's been several years.
It's got to be 10 years at this point, right?
For it having been formally updated, it might be even longer.
Right.
I mean, we look at it as part of the comprehensive plan update, but,
Right.
yeah, so at least formally, it's probably been that long, yeah.
Okay.
We have discussed particular sections off and on when something might be coming through the planning commission, or there's some incident, at a particular part in town of
Right.
the city that, has us revisit it, but, yeah, as far as a formal update, that's not been done for quite a while. And largely because we haven't invested in doing anything with the last inventory that we
Right.
did, so.
Understood. Okay.
Jim, at one point, didn't we have the Public Works building in this capital project?
We did. We have pushed that back.
FY '25.
Yeah, so we had originally put water and sewer in Stumptown Road that would go out to the Festival Park property in FY '24. But we don't think we can tackle that project this coming year. And then the building itself was going to be a year after that. So
Okay,
we
because-
bumped that all back a year.
I couldn't tell if it came out permanently or if it was pushed back.
Yeah, it is.
It's under street
It's under
projects.
streets,
Okay, I didn't,
yeah.
I called
I had the
myself
same
looking
thought. I
through-
had to go digging through
Yeah,
it.
I called myself looking through this and I guess I missed it.
Right, so we've pushed that back,
Okay.
pushed it back a year.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. We'll be ready for more information next month from you. So you're not seeking any action from us?
No, sir.
This month, all right. So we'll
Correct.
remove it from the agenda for Monday evening and bring it back up in May. All right. Next, we have request for sole source purchase for sewer pumping station control panel. This is the Carol Vista you talked about earlier?
Correct. There is a memo from Public Works Director Kevin Smeek and Assistant Director Randy Myers in your packet. Essentially, the control panel at the Carol Vista pumping station is no longer supported by the manufacturer. Should that panel go down, basically, we would have to have somebody staff that 24/7 to be able to turn things on and off as needed. So we want to replace that before it becomes an issue. Public Works reached out to the manufacturer of the current control panel, Smith and Lovelace, and got a quote on that. And they also reached out to Gettle Incorporated, who, as you'll recall, provided the system and the programming for our well control system that now utilizes our wireless mesh network. That's what allowed us to get rid of some of our Verizon phone lines and the cost associated with that. And that system was configured in a way that ultimately we could bring the sewer pumping stations onto it as well. So that was part of the longer range vision. And with the control panel at Carol Vista no longer being supported by Smith and Lovelace, it gives us the opportunity to bring that onto the new system that Gettle has designed for us. And their quote is actually a little bit less than the current manufacturer. So we would like to move forward with the Gettle proposal at $34,848 for a new control panel for the Carol Vista pumping station. It won't be done until next fiscal year, but if we can get the direction to move forward with it, and that, as the mayor mentioned, we discussed earlier as an addition to the capital budget.
Is there an estimate on lead time on this? Is it something where we need to order that now so that it shows up next fiscal year?
If we can do a purchase order and get the ball rolling on that so they can start the design this year, but won't bill us until FY '24.
Right, I just
We
know,
might want to do that because I spoke to Randy about this. And because I noticed that the quote was only good for 30 days past the date, which is already gone.
That, and.
This
right.
is why I
That, yes.
called him. So he said he spoke to Gettle,
Yes.
and they said they would wait until we made the decision, so we might want to put that order in.
they'd wait to increase the price till we made a decision.
So, just a suggestion that
So,
we get
right,
it
so
started.
Right, so we want to get, and this is, at $34,000, is above the threshold that a project normally would go out to bid. But, and certainly that is an option, but in this case, the benefit of bringing it onto our new control system that we've already invested in, that was designed to be able to accommodate the sewer pumping stations, it just makes sense for us to add it to the system that we've already invested in. So that's why we'd like to go sole source purchase rather than bid.
And they like it because they can get the notifications on their phone.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. And they can also turn things on and off.
Yes.
And, right, and then we can get rid of another landline, hopefully.
Okay, I'd like to see us, if it is approved Monday evening, I'd like to see us get the ball rolling.
Yes.
Because these days, delays happen
Yes.
too often, and I don't want this to become a dewatering project again.
Yes.
Okay? Any other questions on this request? All right, that'll be up for your approval on Monday evening as well. Any other items for new business this evening?
I am going to direct your attention to the little teeny tiny map that you were given. At the Planning Commission the other night, there was a discussion about Hartman Street, which runs from Carnival Drive and was originally planned to run to Antrim Boulevard. And I guess the question that we want to bring to us is, do we want this road completed? And then if yes, how? Do we want to put some of that cost on the landowner who's trying to build this brand-new business that I don't think we should, by the way, or do we want to plan on paying it for ourselves? Jim, the one question I was going to ask that I can't remember is, we have a right-of-way already. What is the size of that right-of-way? Is it the size that we need already?
So we don't have a right-of-way across the full property.
Not across the full property?
Right,
Okay.
so Antrim Boulevard, when those properties were subdivided and Antrim Boulevard was planned, there were 3 points of access, or 6, one on each side of the road at 3 different locations. So those access points are split across basically the property on either side owns a piece of that access. And that goes back in so many feet at an angle. But that's the extent that now that Antrim Boulevard is a city street, that is the portion we have the right-of-way for, is like that little angle that just comes off the road and then stops. Beyond that, we don't have a right-of-way. So I think the question is, the thought is that we should at least obtain a right-of-way for the future construction of that street to be able to make the connection. But typically where there's a street that is planned to cross a property and that property is developed, the street is built as part of that development. But we see much more of that scenario in residential than commercial development. So obviously, the developer is interested in moving forward and not having to foot the bill for the entire street that doesn't specifically serve their needs.
I would definitely advocate for us obtaining that right-of-way during this period with the developer, but I'm completely against finishing that street right now. I mean, maybe at some point in the future, someone may see a need for that, but I don't want to draw any additional traffic back on a Carnival Drive for sure. don't, the right-of-way is always good to have. I don't want that street built right now. Other comments?
I know this is premature, but I would want to see numbers before.
Well, and what kind of numbers you're looking for? Because I can tell you
One street,
costs.
there's your number.
right?
So, I mean, cost of construction, I mean,
So,
if we were to foot the
We're
bill,
looking at doing curb, gutter, stormwater, water, and sewer for that section. It would be $230,880. But if we didn't need to run the water and sewer, then we're looking at $67,600. It's a 30-foot wide street. And that's it. I guess we're waiting to find out as the site plan progresses, whether that water needs to come from Antrim side,
Right.
Carnival Drive, so he may already have.
We don't know which way the developer is going to try to tie into the city's system. And those numbers, by the way, are based on the figures we had from the Roberts Mill Road Broad Street project. So
Right.
they may not be current, but for an estimate for these purposes, we thought that was
To show the
adequate.
difference.
just from a public advocacy perspective, I think a lot of residents from Carnival Drive were initially upset over the proposed commercial development anyway, and so I imagine they also wouldn't be too happy about a road and more traffic.
Well, I believe they've been trying to say that the road's going in, but there's no plans for that to happen.
Right.
I just,
But I do agree right of way at this time isn't, might as well have it.
And certainly there was a large audience at the planning commission meeting, and we're aware that some residents spread some misinformation about the proposed project to residents along Carnival Drive.
Right.
Implying that a number of things were going to happen that are really not related to the plan whatsoever. And of course, that riles people up and gets them out. And, and once you've got that mindset created, now you're on the defense. So, it is interesting that, and maybe this isn't something most folks think about, but typically where there's a dead-end street, at least here in the city, it's intended to go someplace.
right,
If it was intended to always end there, it would be a cul-de-sac.
Right.
So dead ends, connote, future connection. Hartman Street, Starboard Drive, even Grand Drive back in the day, and Carnival Drive. They were dead ends, and they were intended to be connected to something.
right.
So same story with Hartman Street, although it doesn't gain as much as some of those other streets, do.
If this property were being developed as a continuation of the existing residential area, I could understand extending that street further out. But to open it up into a proposed commercial area and then onto what is essentially stage one of the bypass, I don't see a benefit to us right now to do that. But again, while we're at the table with the property owner,
Right.
we should be securing that right of way.
Right. It's just about connectivity and,
I understand.
more options to get in and out of different areas and
Right.
different routes people can take.
I don't want to have any way to drive more traffic into an area that shouldn't have more traffic. Agreements, disagreements? Throw down.
Oh, no, I would agree that it
Yes,
I agree.
I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
a possibility for future.
Okay. Well, by consensus, we'll take that as the stance of the council. So Planning Commission is aware of this going forward as well. Anything else? All right. With that, we'll open up the floor one more time for public comment pertaining to agenda items. So anything we discuss this evening on the magical piece of paper is open for your discussion, your comments at the lectern here.
Chris Tillman, 10 York Street. Just a question that came to mind. I know there was some discussion a meeting or two ago about the wireless mesh system and an upgrade to it that would give some real-time feedback through the system about meters and stuff like that. And the question that came to my mind is, as you were talking about the fact that you now have a sole sourced obsolete panel, as we're tying this into this wireless mesh system, is there some scenario where we will eventually be tied into a system that becomes obsolete, and then we're, you know, are we, I'm just not sure exactly where that goes from there. But you know, we just need to be aware of single sourcing things just in that regard. But I understand the intent to get it to that. But the question is that system in some way open so that some other manufacturer could tie in? And I think that that's something we ought to be looking forward into, because, you know, these companies come and go, the systems come and go, software changes, you know, firmware upgrades, and, you know, so these things change. One other quick point about Hartman Drive. I think that, you know, if we should be limiting access onto that section of Antrim Boulevard for future bypass considerations, you know, shouldn't the entrance to the proposed hardware store come in from the Hartman Drive right-of-way, wherein the city might build a section of that, maybe not tie it all the way in at this time, but at least build a section of that in return for being granted that, you know, ownership of that right-of-way, so that you have it. And that also keeps, instead of having another entrance onto Antrim Boulevard from someplace else, that everything is kept to the original 3 locations. I don't know if that does that make sense to you? I mean,
It makes complete sense, and as negotiations move forward, I'm sure things like that will come into play.
okay, that's just my 2 cents on that, so.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on agenda items this evening? All right. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn until Monday evening.
So moved.
And a second to that, please.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. We are adjourned this evening. Thank you all.